What's up, YouTube? It's Anthony Castillo with you guys. Here I am with another talk. So, this one is very interesting, right? So, the reason why I wanted to mainly talk about this one is the spiritual effectiveness. What does that mean? Well, let's think about being effective, right? Even when we think about communication, when we think about research, when we think about different levels of analysis, um, thinking process, and just overall context driven as well. Well, the reason I titled this one Spiritual Effectiveness was because, being effective in life is often an important thing to do, right? Because, in in my other videos, if you listen to how I understood a lot of somatic delusions and how things of the body have captured just awareness and the wisdom that follows with a lot of stuff. Um, and I titled this one "Spiritual Effectiveness" or just "Spiritual Effective," is because we sometimes try to find if we are actually being effective in our life, right? Even if we said the word effective 5 times really fast, how would that sound? Effective, 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 effective. I mean, it sounds kind of like some kind of word from the past that many of us never understood. So, the reason I wanted this one to be about that was because how are we being persistent, right? How are we showing up through the bile thresholds of our life? How are we showing up through time and space? And is our timing on our timing rather than the timing of other people's manifestations that are not supposed to be ours, right? Because when you think about it, right? I know a lot of you, if some of you are very aware of the Bible, I don't like using the Bible as a context driven or the type of concept or idea to be driven with, because a lot of people know only a very few passages about, you reap what you sow, and whatever you are sowing, you're going to reap a harvest. And so sometimes our timing has to make sure that we are reaping the things that we want to reap, right? We want to manifest the things that we want to manifest at its effectiveness. Because if we are allowing other people, for instance, because we're all made up of a neurological system, like just think about NLP, neuro linguistic programming, right? Or this social linguistic aspect of our lives is often driven by people's collective thought. I know a lot of you, if you don't understand anything about psychology and how spirituality is also intertwined, there's lots of research that actually indicates that people group think, in a cluster. 4th of July, for instance, when the wave of emotion is all collective. Sociologists have studied this. People that really observe certain holidays, like when Christmas or some important holiday, people collectively engage with that emotion, right? And if you listen to my other talk about how, I took a class a long time ago about philosophy of emotion, it was the strongest, most intense class I've ever understood. Because how do we get out of certain patterns in our lives that are making us stay conformed to other people's groupthink, right? Well, the best way we do that is by being more effective. And if that's the case, how do we become more effective? Like, take for instance, if you're using some of this, like talks, some of these videos to help you kind of negate and remove yourself from the patterns out there from other people, it can be effective, right? It can be therapeutic in a sense, especially, when communication is involved. But I want to leave you with this one primarily because it is important, right? It's important to understand how we're showing up with the universe and how the universe is also communicating with us and also recognizing what is happening. If we can become more effective in our own consciousness, if we can be more effective in our own manifestations, we may get the results that we need, right? Like, for instance, for me, I, for the longest, have manifested the things that I wanted in my life, and it's come to pass. though it may not reflect on my subscribers, but they worked. They've worked every single time because I put in the evidence, I put in the faith, and I also put in the amount of work that has helped me understand where I'm at in terms of consciousness. You know, I think about most of my family members that don't have a YouTube channel, people that, you know, they have an Instagram, but they use it kind of primarily for the purpose of just like, oh, you know, look at so and so, they've been doing this and that. But like, they're not driven by concepts. They're not driven by ideas. They're not driven by, you know, what to do next. Because if I'll be honest, you know, if you want to do a little deep dive history of my life, like most of my family members have stayed complacent to their same places their whole life. I don't know what happened there. I don't want to dig deep into what it is, but like most of my family members have lived in certain places their whole life that they still live in the same houses like their whole life. From the time I was like, you know, like 20 years ago when I was like 9 years old. And it's kind of kind of like a giant like revelation for me because I'm thinking like, wow, like for me, I've moved on. I had to learn how to move on, and you know, I'll be honest, I'm the first generation of my whole family to ever go and study. uh I would even be honest, to study as a doctor, as a, you know, as a doctoral student. And so I want to leave you guys with that because as we get more and more in depth about where we're going, how we're using our own effectiveness in our lives, we have to learn how to dig deep into ourselves, stay more integrated with ourselves, because as time passes by, we will wake up one day realizing that life has passed us, has moved on, and we can no longer, you know, stick to the past of certain things because it won't allow us, because time and space is going to just keep on moving us forward with, you know, liminal spaces and liminal transition. So I wanted to leave you guys with that one: spiritual effectiveness. However you want to translate that, if we're being effective in our lives, it's up to us that we become effective, not letting other people be effective of the wrong stuff into our life. Because remember about safety, blessings, and protection, or however, what order, always send that to other people. Because I'll be honest, there are people out there that want the opposite. And I can only be the one in my timing to negate all of that. So, anyways, remember to subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya.